Hello and welcome back to Project 380. Today I'm going to be installing the engine side of the fuel system, and I've gone completely overkill. So to start things off, I'm going to need to put the lower part of the Skunk 2 inlet manifold on, and you'll see why very soon. So I've gone ahead and made sure my gasket face is nice and clean, ready for the new gasket. I am going to be using the thermal gasket supplied with the Skunk 2 intake manifold. This is going to help reduce the heat soak from the engine into the intake manifold. I'm going to use this because I've heard horror stories of these failing after time, but I've never seen any evidence. These do have two different sets of holes. The top ones are for the Mark 1 and the bottom ones for the Mark 2, Mark 2.5. So make sure you've got the right hole. The same with the intake. Make sure you're using the correct hole. Now these need to be torqued from 14 foot-pound to 18 foot-pound in a cross-like pattern, but with this it's near on impossible to torque up the bottom ones, so I'm going to have to do the bottom nuts by feel. I feel like maybe the Skunk 2 manifold should have come with extended studs if they want you to use the thermal barrier, as that's not gripping on a lot of meat, but I'm willing to risk it. Now before I go any further, I'm going to pop some microfiber cloths in these holes to stop me dropping anything in these and losing it forever. So now I've installed the lower half of the intake manifold, I can get on with the fuel system. So I have gone for Injector Dynamics ID1050x and a Radium fuel rail. Both of these I have purchased from Rival Motorsports. Rival Motorsports helped me get these, and really quickly. They've been really helpful, so go check their website out. I'll leave a link in the description down below. So why do you need bigger or better injectors? Well, whether it be turboing, supercharging or something crazy, when tuning, the first thing will probably be you run out of fuel or injector duty cycle. There's lots of options when it comes to injectors. A lot of people that are going to run low-ish power in the 200 to 250 horsepower range prefer the RX8 yellow injectors, but be careful, there are a lot of fakes out there. And with the RX8 injectors you won't be able to get huge power levels like 300 plus, as you will run out of duty cycle. So I have gone complete overkill and gone with the 1050cc Injector Dynamics. This is in the hope that I won't even be close to max duty cycle on this injector, and hopefully we'll never have to upgrade it further. So the standard injectors that were in this engine when I pulled it out are 256cc, so a vast improvement on that. These are going to be able to flow a monumental amount of fuel, and hopefully with a good spray pattern, and these do boast that they do produce a really good and clean idle, unlike some other injectors which can cause a really rough lumpy idle. So another reason why I chose the Injector Dynamics. Usually these are a straight fitment, but with the Skunk 2 manifold there are a few clearance issues which I'll get onto in a minute. The only downside to running these injectors is you will have to put a new plug on the wiring harness yourself, and I will cover that in a future video. So now to fit in the injectors. Usually the stock injectors would fit this way or any other injector, but with these you will have to rotate them round to the 8 o'clock position, and this is why I've put the Skunk 2 manifold on first. As you can see, I have ground down this side to allow room for for the injector plugs, like so. As you can see, if the manifold was still there, it would be foul line on here. The injector would never seat properly and would leak everywhere. So to fit these, just take a little bit of assembly grease, put a little bit around the injector seal, and just slide them in, making sure the injector holes themselves are nice and clean first. And you want to do the same with the top ring, just a little bit of assembly lube. And now for the fuel rail. There's no real need to upgrade from the standard fuel rail on the Mark II or the 2.5, as they do flow fine and they work fine. But for me, I think it's going to look outdated on this engine. And I've chose the Radium fuel rail for a few reasons. This gives me lots of fitment options. So there's a hole that end, and in the top, which means I can run my fuel lines wherever I want and how I want. And this does mean I can run AN lines all the way. And because there are 3 fitment holes, it does give me the option to run a fuel damper as well later on if I want to. And the second reason is, it looks really damn cool. I may gain a little bit more performance from this, maybe a little bit more flow, and maybe a little bit more control. So let's get fitting it. So to install the fuel rail, the first thing we're going to need to do is put our black spacers in here. I've been very sensible with these, I haven't misplaced them. So just lay them in there gently, make sure they don't go anywhere, as every time I seem to touch the fuel rail they go missing. Now the fuel rail itself does have 2 options. It fits the Mark 1 with the top hole and the Mark 2, Mark 2.5 with the bottom hole. So again, make sure you pick the right hole. Simply line up all the injectors, wiggle them in place in the holes, and just give it a good squeeze down. You will feel the injectors squeeze inside the fuel rail. Once that happens, just poke your eyes underneath and make sure none of the seals are poking out the bottom, as you will leak fuel everywhere. Now, in the Radium fuel rail kit, they do supply the fitting hardware. So you've got a little fibre washer to stop scratching the fuel rail itself, and then some nice big Allen bolts. These two need to be torqued down to 14 to 18 foot-pounds. So for my setup, I want to try and keep this area nice and tidy so you can see all the nice stuff I've put onto this engine. So I don't want a fuel pipe coming out of this hole up and round, so I'm going to put a block in this port here. This block did come with the fuel rail, and being an American product, this is a 5/16 Allen key. You don't need to go over tight, as these are aluminium. The kit does come with a ORB to AN6 fitment and a barb fitment to use your standard hoses. So I am going to go full AN6 lines for these, so I'm going to put the ORB to AN6 adapters in the end of the rail. Again, these are aluminium fittings, so they don't need to be overly tight, and they only have a rubber seal, so you don't want to crush it. Now, For this end of the fuel rail, I know already I want to come down at a 90-degree angle and disappear down this way. But at the front, I don't know whether I want to use a 90-degree bend and come down and disappear, or whether I want to use a 180 and come across below the fuel rail. But the joys of this fuel rail is it gives me the options to do that. But all I've got at the minute is a 90-degree bend AN6 fitting to go this. And this end I'll have to play about with when I've got in the car and figure out what option I want to go for. And that's all for this episode. If you learn anything, leave me a comment down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time, and make sure you don't lose your free plastic spacers.